the Gulf of Khambhat structures. The sonar scanner was not looking for a city. In December of 2001, India's National Institute of Ocean Technology was running a routine pollution survey of the Gulf of Khambhat, dragging acoustic equipment across the seafloor off the western coast of India. 40 meters below the surface, the readout stopped making sense. Stretching across nearly 9 kilometers of the seabed was a grid, organized, geometric, deliberate. The survey team ran the data again. The grid remained. Follow-up expeditions using sub-bottom profiling confirmed what the side-scan sonar had found. What appeared to be walls, a granary structure, a bath, and a drainage system laid out with the logic of a planned settlement. Dredging operations brought up pottery, sculpture fragments, carved stone, and human bone. A human tooth was extracted from the material and submitted for carbon dating. The date that came back changed the shape of everything. The tooth returned an age of approximately 9,500 years before present. That is not a margin of error. That is 4,000 years before the earliest accepted civilization anywhere on Earth. It is 5,000 years before Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, the cities supposedly representing the dawn of South Asian civilization. If that dating holds, this structure was built when the rest of humanity was, according to every textbook currently in use, living in small hunter-gatherer bands, without writing, without cities, and without the organizational capacity to build drainage systems. The site covers 2 distinct zones approximately 9 kilometers in length and 2 kilometers wide. By any standard definition, that is a city. The carbon dating of the human tooth was announced by the NIOT team to the Indian Parliament in 2002. The recovered artifacts included geometrically worked construction blocks, a structure that NIOT researchers described as resembling a granary floor, and pottery consistent with the Harappan tradition, but substantially older than any Harappan site on record. Geologist Glenn Milne of Durham University, working from global sea level models, confirmed that the Gulf of Khambhat was above water approximately 10,000 years ago, meaning the dates and the geography are not in conflict with each other. They agree. The acoustic images show what survey interpreters described as a bath structure, echoing eerily the famous Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, built 4,000 years later, along with parallel walls consistent with a street grid. Recovered wood fragments were also dated, returning figures between 7,500 and 9,500 years old, multiple sample types clustering around the same era independently. The one factor that has prevented direct visual confirmation is the site itself. Underwater currents in the Gulf of Khambhat are exceptionally strong, making dive verification nearly impossible, which is why the physical evidence remains sonar-based and dredge-recovered rather than directly observed by human eyes. The mainstream archaeological community has responded with caution, bordering on dismissal. The primary objection is that dredging is not controlled excavation. Artifacts lifted from a seabed cannot be reliably associated with specific structures, and organic material dated at the site could theoretically have washed in from elsewhere. Strong currents in the Gulf are known to transport debris over significant distances, and a 9,500-year-old tooth found near geometric structures does not, by itself, prove those structures are equally ancient. Until a properly controlled underwater excavation is conducted, most archaeologists classify the site as intriguing but unverified. But the sonar images are not floating debris. A 9-kilometer grid of walls, apparent rooms, and a drainage channel does not wash in from upstream. Geometric organization at that scale is not something a current produces, and if Glenn Milne's sea-level modeling is correct, this part of the Gulf was definitively above water at precisely the time the carbon dates suggest it was occupied. The geography and the dates agree with each other. The only thing they disagree with is the timeline currently taught in every classroom on Earth. Some researchers have asked whether the Gulf of Khambhat might represent the cultural ancestor of the Harappan civilization, a mother city already ancient when Mohenjo-Daro was new. If an organized population was living here 9,500 years ago, and the sea rose catastrophically as the last ice age ended, could a displaced people have carried the knowledge of city building northward into the Indus Valley, where civilization supposedly emerged millennia later? Could the memory of that drowning be older than the texts that first recorded it? Why, in 20-plus years since discovery, has no fully funded, controlled excavation been commissioned? And why does the structural layout of this submerged site echo the design language of cities built thousands of years after it supposedly should not have existed? From a buried city beneath an ancient sea off India's coast, we cross the Pacific to a stone monument rising from the ocean floor near Japan, where two of the world's most respected geologists spent decades reaching opposite conclusions about the same structure, and where the Japanese government has never officially decided which of them is right. The Yonaguni Monument. He was looking for hammerhead sharks. In 1986, dive instructor Kihachiro Aratake slipped below the surface near Japan's westernmost island and found something that had no business being there. At 25 meters depth in the waters off Yonaguni Island in Okinawa Prefecture, he came face to face with a structure that looked less like geology and more like architecture. Flat terraces the size of football fields, right-angle cuts in the stone, parallel walls running in formation, and what appeared to be a staircase leading down to a level surface below. News spread through the diving community before it reached researchers. Professor Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyu began survey dives in the late 1980s and continued documenting the site for over 2 decades. Eventually, Robert Schoch of Boston University, the geologist whose controversial redating of the Sphinx had already made him comfortable with uncomfortable conclusions, also dived the site. He and Kimura looked at the same structure and reached sharply different conclusions. The monument itself is a massive stepped formation, approximately 150 meters long, 40 meters wide, and 27 meters tall, roughly the height of an 8-story building, composed of sandstone and mudstone. The size is not what makes it remarkable, it is the geometry. Right angles occur in nature, but they rarely repeat. Parallel walls occur in nature, but not in organized clusters. A flat platform, roughly 50 meters wide, flanked by a vertical face dropping approximately 7 meters, is not a common geological outcome. After more than 100 dives, Kimura cataloged over 10 distinct architectural features: terraces, pillars, a trench, what he identified as a road, twin megaliths standing upright, a star-shaped platform, and a carved formation he described as a human face in the rock. He published his conclusions in peer-reviewed papers, including the Journal of Geography, arguing that the evidence of tool marks, drainage channels, and a rock basin he identified could not have formed naturally. Schoch, after his own dive series, concluded in published work that the primary structure is natural, formed by the fracture of layered sandstone along its joint planes, which can produce flat surfaces and right-angle edges. But he acknowledged that some features may show secondary human modification. Sea level data from Japanese geological surveys confirms the Yonaguni area was above sea level between approximately 10,000 and 8,000 BC, placing any land surface construction in a period when modern humans were definitively present in the region. Kimura also identified a formation he called the turtle, a distinct zoomorphic shape carved into a rock platform, and a marking resembling a known Okinawan petroglyph. The Japanese government has never officially designated the site as a cultural heritage location, leaving its status natural or constructed, legally and officially unresolved 35 years after its discovery. The mainstream position, represented most authoritatively by Schoch, is that the Yonaguni Monument is a natural sandstone formation shaped by the island's geology. Sandstone fractures along regular joint planes and can produce flat surfaces and right-angle edges. Strong tidal action and undersea currents around Yonaguni erode stone in distinctive ways. The stepped appearance, the mainstream argument holds, is consistent with the natural weathering of layered sedimentary rock, and similar natural terraced formations exist elsewhere in the world. But Schoch himself acknowledged that some features resist purely natural explanation. And the joint plane fracture argument, whatever its merits for the main terraces, cannot account for the repeating geometry of parallel walls, a sunken corridor between two stone faces, twin standing megaliths, and a carved face in the rock. Natural fracture produces angles. It does not tend to produce corridors. It does not tend to produce faces. If any portion of Yonaguni was shaped by human hands, those hands were working before 8000 BC, placing a stone-working culture in the Ryukyu Islands at a time when the site was still above water, a culture that leaves no other trace in the archaeological record. Some researchers ask whether the absence of that record reflects absence of occupation or absence of investigation. The question of what Yonaguni actually is remains officially open. A monument to a disagreement that, according to the Japanese government, does not yet need to be resolved. From the warm Pacific, we move north into the cold dark of the Baltic Sea, where a sonar image taken in 2011 produced the most widely shared underwater mystery photograph in Internet history, and where no official explanation has ever fully closed the case. The Baltic Sea Anomaly. Peter Lindbergh had a rule. After decades searching for shipwrecks in the Baltic, he did not get excited about sonar images. The seafloor was full of shapes that meant nothing, and experience had cured him of misreading them. But when the side-scan sonar aboard the Ocean X Team's research vessel returned an image in June of 2011, he broke his rule. At 85 meters below the surface of the Baltic Sea, approximately 85 kilometers from the Swedish coast, was a circle, 60 meters across, with a 400-meter trail behind it, as if something had skidded across the floor of the ocean and stopped. Lindbergh and his co-director Dennis Osberg had been running a routine commercial survey when the image appeared. It became one of the most widely shared underwater photographs in Internet history. A follow-up dive expedition in 2012 sent a team physically down to the object. What they reported added layers to the mystery rather than resolving it. The structure measures approximately 60 meters in diameter, roughly the wingspan of a Boeing 747, a measurement consistent across multiple independent sonar passes. The divers reported a circular outer rim, a 25-centimeter thick elevated wall running around the circumference, and an opening or passage in the upper section. The surface was coated in a strange sooty black material. Volker Bruckert, an associate professor of geology at Stockholm University, analyzed a sample retrieved from the site and identified it as metamorphic rock, a type not normally found on the Baltic seabed, which is composed primarily of sedimentary glacial deposits. It should not be there. The soot sample Bruckert tested also showed characteristics consistent with material that had been subjected to extreme heat at some point in its history. The 400-meter trail leading to the object shows the same circular cross-section as the object itself, suggesting the two features were formed by the same event rather than coincidentally placed near each other. And the divers reported that a Sony video camera, a satellite phone, and 2 dive computers all stopped functioning within approximately 200 meters of the object, resuming normal operation when moved away. This was reported by multiple divers independently. The Swedish Defense Research Agency was reported to have expressed interest in the site, though official involvement was never confirmed or denied by the Swedish government. The mainstream geological explanation is that the Baltic Sea anomaly is a natural glacial formation, an unusual deposit or feature created when glaciers carved and shaped the Baltic Basin during the last ice age. Circular glacial formations are documented. The trail could represent a glacial ridge. The electronic interference, skeptics have argued, is attributable to high mineralization in that area of the Baltic, which is known to affect electronic equipment independently of any specific object. But the geologist who analyzed the retrieved sample identified the rock as anomalous for the Baltic floor regardless of what shape it takes. And high mineralization in Baltic water is a regional condition, a constant. High mineralization that activates and deactivates based on proximity to a specific 60-meter circle is not a regional condition, it is a localized one. The interference pattern, present within 200 meters, absent beyond it, is not what dissolved minerals in seawater produce uniformly across an entire region. Some researchers have asked whether the anomaly might be a structure built on land before the Baltic Basin flooded, perhaps 10,000 to 12,000 years ago when the region was above water. Whether natural or constructed, what is perhaps most remarkable about the site is not the object itself, but the silence around it. The OceanX team has requested academic partnership repeatedly and publicly over more than a decade. What is it, some researchers wonder, that makes a 60-meter formation with anomalous rock composition a matching 400-meter trail and documented electromagnetic effects so consistently unworthy of a funded scientific investigation? From a cold northern mystery that science has quietly declined to investigate, we travel south to warmer shores, where an ancient text written thousands of years ago described a city that would sink into the sea, and where modern divers found that city in exactly the location the text described. Dwarka. The Mahabharata, one of the oldest epic texts in human history, describes the city of Dwarka in precise detail. Its walls, its towers, its harbor, the sea that surrounded it on 3 sides, and then the sea claiming it. Within a day and a night of Krishna's death, the text says, the ocean swallowed Dwarka whole. For centuries, scholars filed this under poetry. Then in 1988, the Archaeological Survey of India sent divers into the water off the coast of Gujarat, and the divers found walls. Marine archaeologist S.R. Rao had led ASI expeditions beginning in 1983, with intensive work continuing through the late 80s and into the 90s. Excavations both onshore, the modern city of Dwarka is built over earlier layers, and underwater off the coast revealed submerged structural remains. The ASI formally declared these finds to be the ancient city of Dwarka. The National Institute of Oceanography conducted further expeditions, extending the confirmed footprint deeper into the Gulf of Khambhat, the same body of water where the 9,500-year structures were subsequently discovered by a pollution survey just over a decade later. The artifacts recovered from the submerged site were dated using thermoluminescence to between 7,500 and 9,000 years before present, tested by independent laboratories. That overlap with the Gulf of Khambhat dates is not incidental. Both sites sit on the same flooded coastline, and both returned ages from the same window of post-Ice Age inundation. The Mahabharata's description of Dwarka includes a western coastal location, a harbor city, a wall facing the sea, and a city laid out on a grid. The submerged structural remains confirm a western coastal location, a harbor context, walls, and a grid-consistent layout. A National Institute of Oceanography expedition in 2000 extended the survey and located submerged structural features at greater depth, expanding the confirmed site. Geologist Glenn Milne's sea-level reconstructions confirmed the Gujarat coast was significantly further seaward 8,000 to 10,000 years ago, consistent with a coastal city now sitting at the depths where remains have been found. The Mahabharata specifies the ocean reclaimed the city after Krishna's death, an event the Puranic tradition places approximately 5,000 years ago. But the physical dating of the submerged remains is substantially older, creating a gap between the text's specific event and the physical evidence beneath the water. And, critically, the ASI designation of the site as a protected archaeological site under Indian law was formally enacted. This is confirmed, government-recognized, legally protected archaeology. Not fringe, not alternative, official. Mainstream archaeology accepts the submerged remains as genuine ancient structures without dispute. The debate concerns age and relationship to the text. Most historians suggest the Mahabharata incorporated real geographical knowledge, but that the oral tradition cannot be reliably dated to match the 7,500-year physical remains. The city may have been occupied across many periods, with structures of different ages, and the oldest physical evidence does not necessarily represent the specific Dwarka the epic describes, but the Mahabharata describes the sea taking the city. The sea took the city. Location confirmed, structures confirmed, inundation confirmed. The only remaining argument is about which occupation layer the text was memorializing, and that argument conveniently allows everyone to avoid the larger question. If a 7,500-year-old city on the Indian coast has an oral tradition accurate enough to preserve its location, its layout, and the fact of its drowning across dozens of generations of unwritten transmission, what else in the ancient texts is geography wearing the costume of myth? Some researchers have asked whether Dwarka and the Gulf of Khambhat site together hint at a civilizational tradition in South Asia far older than Mesopotamia is usually credited as originating. If organized coastal settlements existed here 7,500 to 9,500 years ago and were drowned by post-Ice Age sea level rise, could the flood myth, the sunken city tradition, and the persistent memory of a more ancient world be not metaphor, but memory? Could the Mahabharata be doing what the fishermen of Mahabalipuram were still doing in 2004? Simply remembering accurately where the buildings went. From the warm Indian Ocean, we move north and west to the Black Sea, where an oceanographer who found the Titanic went looking for evidence of a catastrophic ancient flood and found a preserved coastline still waiting, exactly where the geology said it would be, the Black Sea shoreline. Robert Ballard found the Titanic. He found the Bismarck. He found John F. Kennedy's PT-109 at the bottom of the Pacific. When Ballard applies the full weight of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution's technology to a question, he tends to get an answer. In 1999, he took that technology to the Black Sea and asked whether a catastrophic ancient flood had really happened. At 155 meters below the surface, approximately 19 kilometers off the northern coast of Turkey, he found a coastline. Preserved, intact, 7,500 years old. Ballard's expedition was designed to investigate a hypothesis published in 1997 by geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman, who had analyzed sediment cores from the Black Sea and proposed that the sea had once been a freshwater lake, dramatically smaller than it is today. Their model held that approximately 7,600 years ago, a catastrophic breach of the Bosphorus land bridge caused a violent saltwater inundation from the Mediterranean. The two bodies of water meeting at a rate that Ryan and Pittman calculated at approximately 200 times the volume of Niagara Falls, enough to raise the Black Sea level by 15 centimeters per day. Coastal populations, their model suggested, would have had weeks at most to abandon everything and flee inland, permanently. Ballard's remotely operated vehicles descended to 155 meters and documented what was not geological evidence of a former shoreline, but the shoreline itself, a former river delta, smoothed beach stones that can only form through wave action in shallow water, a former land surface, and wooden structures. AMS radiocarbon dating of the wooden beams returned an age of approximately 7,500 years, placing the wood at the shoreline at precisely the moment Ryan and Pittman's flood model predicted the water arrived. Cold, low oxygen, low salinity deep water had frozen the site in time. The sediment core analysis Ryan and Pittman had conducted before Ballard's expedition showed a sharp transition from freshwater to saltwater species, a distinct boundary consistent with a single rapid inundation rather than gradual sea level change. The Black Sea sits at the intersection of 6 ancient cultures: Mesopotamian, Greek, Anatolian, Indo-European, Caucasian, and Scythian. And all of them carry flood traditions in their mythological record, a geographic clustering that Ryan and Pittman had originally proposed as the origin of the Noah narrative. Ballard's 2000 return expedition located what appeared to be a collapsed structure, possibly a dwelling, on the ancient shoreline, with rectangular geometry inconsistent with natural sediment deposition. A National Geographic Society-funded follow-up confirmed and extended these findings, locating additional preserved features along the ancient shoreline zone. The Ryan-Pittman hypothesis, while widely discussed, remains disputed within geology. Some researchers argue this sediment core transition reflects gradual rather than catastrophic inundation. Others accept a flooding event but dispute its speed and scale. Most mainstream archaeologists acknowledge that the Black Sea Basin changed dramatically during the post-Ice Age period, while resisting the direct connection to flood mythology as inference rather than demonstrated evidence. But the wooden structure on that submerged coast was not a sediment anomaly. Wood does not drift to 155 meters of depth and arrange itself into rectangular geometry. Someone built something there, on a coast now as deep as a 50-story building is tall at the exact moment the geological record says the water came. Whether or not this specific event was the origin of any specific flood narrative is a secondary question. The primary fact is that an inhabited coast was drowned rapidly and completely, and the people on it had to go somewhere. Some researchers have asked whether that somewhere explains what comes next in the archaeological record: the rapid spread of early European farming cultures, the sudden appearance of similar pottery styles across wide geographic areas at approximately the same date, the near-universal flood tradition found in cultures from Mesopotamia to India to Scandinavia to the Americas. Could the myth not be metaphor but migration memory? The story survivors told their children about the day the sea came for everything, passed down until it became the oldest story humanity knows. Could the displaced population of the Black Sea shore be the origin point of a cultural diaspora whose ripples are still visible in every tradition of a world before the water? From a ghost coastline preserved in the deep cold, we descend to a site even more intimate, a village where the sea came to, but gently enough that what it covered, it kept. Atlit Yam. There are underwater ruins, and then there is Atlit Yam. Most submerged sites give you stone foundations and silence. Atlit Yam gives you stone foundations, a functioning well, a ritual circle of 7 megaliths, and 7 human skeletons still lying in the exact positions they were placed the day of their burial, 9,000 years ago, in a village that now rests 8 to 12 meters beneath the surface of the Mediterranean, 200 meters from shore. Marine archaeologist Ehud Galili discovered the site in 1984 during a routine underwater survey off the coast near Atlit in Haifa Bay, Israel. Systematic excavation followed through the Israel Antiquities Authority, continuing through the 90s and 2000s. The result is one of the most thoroughly documented submerged prehistoric sites in the world. Multiple peer-reviewed papers have been published from the site. It appears in mainstream archaeological literature not as a curiosity but as a reference point, the standard against which other Neolithic coastal sites are compared. Radiocarbon dating of organic material conducted by the Israel Antiquities Authority consistently returns dates of 6,900 to 6,300 BC, making Atlit Yam one of the oldest securely dated submerged settlements on record. The freshwater well at the site, constructed from stone and wood, is the oldest known engineered water well on Earth, a finding published in the Journal of the Israel Prehistoric Society. 7 megaliths, each weighing several hundred kilograms, are arranged in a semicircle around what was once a freshwater spring, a ritual or ceremonial arrangement with no parallel in the contemporaneous land-based archaeological record of the region. Human skeletons recovered from the site show evidence of tuberculosis, representing the earliest documented cases of TB in human history, with findings published in PLOS 1 in 2008. This is a peer-reviewed scientific contribution from the site, not fringe archaeology, representing a genuine addition to the medical historical record. Animal bones, including domesticated cattle, pig, and sheep, were recovered alongside fish hooks and harpoons, indicating a mixed farming and fishing economy of unexpected sophistication for the date. Pollen analysis of surrounding sediment suggests the village was submerged rapidly by sea level rise rather than gradually, consistent with post-Ice Age inundation events documented at other sites on this list. The preservation state of organic material, wood, seeds, articulated animal and human skeletons, is attributed to the low turbulence nature of the inundation. The village was covered thoroughly enough to seal it from disturbance, but gently enough that structures remained upright and the dead remained where they were placed. Mainstream archaeology accepts all of this without dispute. The site is celebrated precisely because it is so well preserved and well documented. Post-Ice Age sea level rise submerged this village along with many others during the same broad period, and the low-energy environment of this particular stretch of coast happened to seal it intact. A fortunate accident of preservation. But if Atlit Yam was found by accident in a routine survey only 8 to 12 meters underwater, 200 meters from a publicly used beach, what is sitting in 40 meters of water, 10 kilometers offshore? The global continental shelf that was above sea level during the last ice age covers approximately 27 million square kilometers. The fraction surveyed with anything approaching the resolution brought to Atlit Yam is vanishingly small. We have not found the submerged Neolithic world. We have found one village inside it and declared that we understand the scope. Some researchers have begun calling the submerged continental shelf the largest uninvestigated archaeological zone on Earth. During the last ice age, sea levels were 120 to 130 meters lower than today. The coastal zones, the most productive, most habitable, most desirable environments for any human population, are now entirely underwater, globally. The civilizations we know about are the ones that built on high ground, on hills, inland. The commercial layer, the fishing communities, the coastal settlements where most ordinary people actually lived, the places that shaped the knowledge and culture that filtered up into what we later called civilization. Where are those? Atlit Yam is the proof of concept that they still exist. The library is not burned, it is flooded, and the skeletons are still in there, still in the positions they were placed, still waiting for someone to look. From a village preserved beneath the Mediterranean, we cross the Atlantic to the Bahamas. where a submerged stone road was found in the same year, on almost the exact same day that a man who had been dead for over 20 years predicted it would be. The Bimini Road. In 1938, a man named Edgar Cayce lay on a couch in Virginia, entered the trance state he claimed allowed him to access information unavailable to the conscious mind, and dictated a specific prediction. Evidence of a lost civilization would rise near the island of Bimini in the year 1968 or 1969. On September 2, 1968, Dr. J. Manson Valentine, a zoologist and oceanographer working with local divers off North Bimini Island in the Bahamas, found a submerged stone road in 5 to 8 meters of water. Cayce had been dead for 23 years. The road is still there. The prediction is still in the documented record, and no one has fully explained either one. Valentine's discovery prompted investigations by marine geologists, archaeologists, and oceanographers across the following decades. The site consists of approximately 700 meters of large, flat, polygonal limestone blocks arranged in a curved double or triple row, later mapped in detail by Dr. David Zink's expedition in the 1970s. The individual stones range from 2 to 4 meters across. They are flat on top and level with each other in a way that differs from natural beach rock formation. Pilot Robert Brush reported in 1968 that aerial surveys revealed additional linear and J-shaped formations extending beyond the known road section, suggesting that the documented feature is part of a larger pattern as yet incompletely mapped. The estimated count of individual stones runs to approximately 2,000. Marine geologist Dr. Eugene Shin of the U.S. Geological Survey conducted core samples in the 1970s and concluded that the stones are naturally formed beach rock, limestone that precipitates in layers on warm, shallow beaches, with the linear arrangement resulting from natural fracture patterns along the beach contour. A counter-analysis by researchers Dr. Greg Little and John Van Auken noted that several stones rest on rounded stone supports beneath them, a feature inconsistent with naturally fractured beach rock, which would be expected to lie flat against the underlying surface rather than elevated on props. Carbon dating of a wooden prop found lodged beneath one of the roadstones returned an age of approximately 5,000 years before present, though this date was disputed on the grounds that the wood could theoretically have drifted to its position rather than having been placed there. Sea level models confirmed the Bimini area was above sea level approximately 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, consistent with the possibility of land surface construction during human occupation of the Caribbean region. The mainstream geological position, represented most authoritatively by Shin, is that the road is beach rock. Beach rock forms in layers parallel to the beach slope, and when those layers fracture, they produce rectangular and polygonal blocks. The linear arrangement follows a natural beach contour. The flatness of the blocks is a property of layered limestone deposition. This is the majority scientific position, and it is grounded in a documented geological process that genuinely occurs in shallow tropical environments. But Shin's own core samples found that the limestone layers within the roadstones are tilted at the same angle as the seafloor beneath them, not horizontal as beach rock formation requires. Beach rock forms parallel to the water surface. If these blocks formed in place as beach rock, their internal layers should be horizontal. They are not, which means either the blocks were moved after formation, placing them in their current position from elsewhere, or they did not form as beach rock at all. Shin's own data leaves a gap that Shin's own conclusion does not fill. Some researchers have asked whether a population capable of relocating 2-ton stones was living on the Bahamas platform 4,000 to 6,000 years ago when it was above water. No such culture currently appears in the Caribbean archaeological record, But is the absence of that record a confirmed absence of occupation, or a reflection of the fact that most of the Bahamas platform from that period is now, like the road itself, sitting under several meters of warm, clear water? And what should be made of the prediction, specific, documented, pre-discovery, of a man who claimed to see things that had not yet been found? From a road in the Atlantic that refuses to be dismissed, we return to the Indian Ocean, where a tsunami pulled back the sea for a few minutes in 2004 and revealed, briefly, what the fishermen of one Tamil Nadu community had been saying existed for as long as anyone alive could remember: the sunken temples of Mahabalipuram. The fishermen of Mahabalipuram had been saying it for generations. There are temples under the water. The sea took them. Scholars noted the tradition, classified it as local mythology, and moved on. On December 26, 2004, the Indian Ocean earthquake struck and the resulting tsunami hit the Tamil Nadu coast. In the minutes before the wave arrived, as the sea pulled catastrophically back from the shore, the sand cleared, and for the first time in living memory, outlines of stone structures appeared in the shallows. Then the wave returned and covered them again. Local oral tradition in Mahabalipuram had long described a city of 7 temples, of which only one, the Shore Temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site built during the Pallava dynasty approximately 1,200 to 1,500 years ago, remained visible above water. In 2001, a joint expedition by the Scientific Exploration Society and India's National Institute of Oceanography, involving researcher Graham Hancock and geologist Badri Narayanan, had located submerged walls, steps, a collapsed temple structure, and sculptural fragments within 500 meters of shore at depths of 5 to 7 meters. The Archaeological Survey of India's post-tsunami survey in January 2005 formally documented and photographed the newly exposed structural features, including what appeared to be a complete temple platform and a carved lion sculpture consistent with Pallava iconography. The ASI Dive Team's official 2005 report confirmed the presence of a large rectangular structure and remains of 2 additional structures on either side of it, offshore from the Shore Temple. Satellite photographs taken in the immediate aftermath of the tsunami withdrawal showed rectangular dark shapes in the near-shore shallows consistent with structural remains, images publicly available but not acknowledged in official reports until dive teams confirmed them physically. Carved granite blocks recovered from the site include depictions of elephants, horses, and deities consistent with 7th century Pallava iconography, confirming the submerged structures belong to the same cultural tradition as the above-water Shore Temple. The tsunami withdrawal itself was filmed and broadcast internationally, showing clear wall foundation outlines in the briefly exposed sand, footage that remains one of the strangest pieces of accidental archaeological evidence ever captured on camera. The ASI's position is straightforward and fully accepts the submerged structures as genuine Pallava-era archaeological remains. The Pallava dynasty built extensively along this coast, and some structures were lost to coastal erosion, subsidence, and storm action over the past 1,200 to 1,500 years. The oral tradition of 7 temples is a memory of actual buildings, not mythological confabulation. The mainstream explanation here is not dismissive, it is accepting. The site is simply incompletely excavated. But the mainstream explanation, in this case, makes the alternative argument entirely on its own. If oral tradition accurately preserved the existence, number, and approximate location of specific submerged stone buildings for 1,200 to 1,500 years, across conquest, colonization, the complete disruption of the Pallava dynasty, and the total absence of any written record documenting those specific structures, then oral tradition is a far more reliable archive than the scholarly consensus has typically allowed. 50 generations of fishermen remembered where the temples were. They were right. Some researchers have asked what follows from that demonstration of oral accuracy. If communities can preserve precise structural knowledge across 50 generations without writing, what should be done with the Mahabharata's description of Dwarka? With the Sumerian flood account that predates Genesis? With every coastal culture on Earth that carries a tradition of land swallowed by the sea? Mahabalipuram doesn't prove those traditions are accurate, but it removes the assumption that they cannot be. The fishermen were not telling stories. They were giving directions to buildings they could no longer see, and they were right. But Mahabalipuram's temples are recent by the standards of what comes next. Because off the southern coast of Greece, in water so shallow a snorkeler can see the room divisions from the surface, sits the oldest confirmed submerged city on Earth, found by a student who was not looking for it. Pavlopetri. In 1967, a Cambridge oceanography student named Nicholas Fleming pulled on his mask and swam out from a beach in southern Greece with no particular objective. Below him, in 3 to 4 meters of water in Vatica Bay off the Laconian coast, he found 15 buildings, a main street, connecting side roads, a central square, a cemetery, and what appeared to be walled gardens or courtyards. He had found a complete Bronze Age city. And it had been there, 100 meters from a public beach, for 3,000 years. Fleming documented the discovery in a brief paper. A 1968 Cambridge survey produced the first site map. Then, largely, the site waited, present in the literature, but not comprehensively investigated, until 2009, when a joint University of Nottingham and Greek effort of underwater antiquities expedition used digital underwater mapping to produce a complete three-dimensional plan of the site. That survey, led by John Henderson and published in the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology, transformed Pavlopetri from a footnote into the most completely documented prehistoric submerged city in the world. The site covers approximately 9 acres. The walls of its buildings stand up to 1 meter high. The street network is intact and legible. Pottery recovered from the site spans the early Bronze Age at approximately 3000 BC through the Mycenaean period at approximately 1200 BC, confirming continuous occupation of approximately 1,800 years before submersion. The 2009 survey identified a previously unknown Minoan period building, extending the confirmed cultural connections of the site to the broader Bronze Age Mediterranean trade network linking Minoan Crete and Mycenaean Greece. Tablets with linear B script, the earliest known form of written Greek, were found in the vicinity of the site, suggesting administrative functions consistent with an active trading port. Geological analysis indicates the site was submerged gradually around 1000 BC through a combination of land subsidence and ongoing sea level change. The gentle inundation, rather than a sudden event, explains why walls remained upright and the city plan was preserved intact. The site sits in 3 to 4 meters of water, close enough to the surface that on a clear day, individual room divisions and street outlines are visible to snorkelers without diving. A BBC documentary produced in collaboration with the Nottingham team in 2011 resulted in the first public digital reconstruction of the full city and prompted the Greek government to establish a formally protected archaeological zone over the site. Pavlopetri is celebrated by mainstream archaeology, not disputed. It is one of the field's prize sites precisely because it provides a complete Bronze Age urban plan unavailable from any land excavation of the same period. Post-Ice Age sea level rise and tectonic subsidence submerged this coastal settlement, and the low-energy environment of Vatica Bay preserved it. There is no controversy here. But Pavlo-Petri's acceptance by mainstream archaeology is itself the most uncomfortable fact on this list. This was not a legendary city. It was not a monument to extraordinary ambition or lost technology. It was a moderate Bronze Age trading port, the kind of unremarkable coastal settlement that existed all along this shoreline. And it sat in 3 meters of water, 100 meters from a beach where people have been swimming throughout living memory for 3,000 years without being formally documented. If a complete Bronze Age city could exist in plain sight at the water's edge for 3 millennia, how many others are sitting in 20 meters of water, 2 kilometers offshore, on coastlines where no survey has been run? Some researchers have pointed to the statistical implication. The Bronze Age Mediterranean coastline was the most intensively inhabited shoreline in the ancient world. The post-Ice Age sea level rise put the water's edge 2 to 4 meters higher than it stood when Pavlo-Petri was active. Every harbor, every wharf, every settlement that built at the water's edge in 2000 BC is now slightly underwater. The cities that archaeology has named and studied, Mycenae, Tiryns, Knossos, are the ones built on high ground, the administrative and ceremonial centers. Could the commercial layer, the ports, the places where the majority of people actually lived and traded be where Pavlo-Petri suggests they are? In the water, legible, waiting, not lost, just unlooked for. Pavlo-Petri is one city. What comes next is not a city, not a coast, not a port. It is an entire continent, and it is sitting under one of the most heavily trafficked bodies of water on Earth, Doggerland. Beneath the surface of the North Sea, one of the busiest shipping lanes on Earth, crossed by tankers and container ships every hour of every day, lies a continent, not a ruin field, not a cluster of artifacts, a continent. It had rivers, it had hills, forests, marshland, and lakes. It had shorelines that faced both the Atlantic and what would eventually become the English Channel. It supported a population of tens of thousands of people across tens of thousands of years of occupation, and it was drowned so completely and so recently in geological terms that we are only now assembling a map of it, using data that the oil industry collected for entirely different reasons. The existence of a former landmass beneath the North Sea was suspected since the 19th century, when North Sea fishermen began pulling up objects that should not have been in the water. Mammoth teeth, stone tools, carved antler harpoons. In 1931, a fishing trawler operating over Dogger Bank, 70 miles off the English coast, pulled up a lump of peat containing a Neanderthal skull fragment from 25 meters of water. Not a modern human, a Neanderthal, at a location that was a freshwater inland environment during that species' occupation of Europe. Geographer Brian E. Coles coined the name Doggerland in 1998. The most comprehensive reconstruction was produced by geologists including Bernhard Wenninger and archaeologist Vince Gaffney at the University of Bradford. Using seismic survey data accumulated by the oil and gas industry across decades of North Sea exploration, data gathered for petroleum, repurposed for prehistory. The geological picture Gaffney's team assembled and published in Europe's Lost World. The rediscovery of Doggerland in 2009 showed river valleys, lake basins, and a coastline around what is now Dogger Bank, a terrain model of a landscape roughly the size of modern France that was above water during the last glacial maximum, when sea levels were 120 meters lower than today. Artifact hauls from North Sea fishing vessels and oil platform construction across the decades have produced Paleolithic stone tools, Mesolithic bone harpoons, mammoth teeth, woolly rhinoceros bones, and worked antler dated to between 15,000 and 8,000 years before present. A human shin bone, discovered by North Sea fishermen, was dated to approximately 10,000 years before present, placing a modern human on Doggerland during the same broad period as Göbekli Tepe and the Gulf of Khambhat structures, a simultaneous window of early civilization-level activity now represented on the seafloor by a single bone in a net. Research published in 2014 by Bernhard Wenninger and colleagues in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences identified a candidate catastrophic end event. The Storegga Slide, an underwater landslide off Norway's coast that generated a massive tsunami, possibly striking the last remnants of Doggerland around 6,200 BC and flooding what remained of the landmass in a single event. The Doggerbank itself, the shallowest remnant of Doggerland, currently 15 to 36 meters underwater, was above sea level until approximately 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, supporting a Mesolithic population during the same period as the other sites on this list. And the oil industry's seismic data has produced images of ancient riverbeds, lakes, and topographic features across 18,000 square kilometers of the North Sea floor, a data set larger than most countries' entire archaeological survey archives, accessed partially by the University of Bradford team, but never systematically released for full archaeological interpretation. Doggerland is fully accepted by mainstream geology and archaeology as a real former landmass. Its submersion under post-Ice Age seas is not contested. The mainstream position is practical. Systematic underwater archaeological investigation of the North Sea is logistically and financially impractical given the depths, currents, and sedimentation involved. Most of Doggerland's archaeological content is assumed to lie buried under meters of sediment rather than accessible on the surface, and the trawled artifacts represent the practical ceiling of what can be recovered without purpose-built, deep excavation infrastructure. But the oil and gas industry has already paid for the seismic survey data that would allow precise targeting of the most archaeologically significant areas. That data exists in corporate archives. The University of Bradford accessed portions of it and produced the best map of Doggerland currently available. The full dataset has never been made available for systematic archaeological interpretation. The largest uninvestigated Mesolithic landscape in Europe is partially mapped, structurally understood, and institutionally inaccessible, not because the technology does not exist, but because no one has made it a priority. Some researchers have asked whether the Storegga tsunami, if it struck the last inhabited remnants of Doggerland around 6,200 BC, might represent another instance of the same pattern. A populated coastal world drowned suddenly, completely, and catastrophically, its survivors carrying the memory inland and forward through generations until it became, in the mouths of their descendants' legend. Could the sunken lands of Welsh mythology be Doggerland? The drowned kingdoms of Norse tradition? We may never know. But the shin bone was there. The skull was there. The harpoon pulled from a fishing net was there. Their world is still on the seafloor, and the seismic data to find its most significant sites is sitting in an archive waiting for someone to ask. Look at what connects these 10 sites. A 9,500-year-old grid beneath the Gulf of Khambhat. A stone road in the Bahamas found on the year a dead man predicted. A preserved Neolithic village where the skeletons still embrace their children. A continent under the North Sea where the fishermen have pulled up mammoth teeth for 2 centuries. A coastline 155 meters deep that Robert Ballard found at exactly the age the flood model said it would be. The pattern is not conspiracy. It is coastline. For the overwhelming majority of human history, the most habitable land on Earth was coastal land, river deltas, sheltered bays, shorelines where fish ran and trade moved and cities naturally grew. When the last ice age ended, sea levels rose 120 to 130 meters over roughly 10,000 years. Every coastal settlement built at the water's edge during that transition is now underwater. The inhabited world of the Ice Age did not disappear. It was submerged. Mainstream archaeology acknowledges this. The disagreement is not about whether the water came, it is about what was there when it did. The conventional answer is not much. Small bands of hunter-gatherers. Nothing organized enough to leave a meaningful archaeological signature. The 10 sites on this list suggest a different accounting. At Atlit Yam, a village with an engineered water well, a ritual megalith circle, and articulated burials. At Dwarka, a grid-planned city confirmed and protected by the government of India. At Pavlopetri, a complete Bronze Age urban plan in 3 meters of water, 100 meters from a public beach, overlooked for 3,000 years. At the Gulf of Khambhat, a 9-kilometer grid with carbon dates 4,000 years older than accepted civilization. The alternative interpretation, stated plainly, is not sensational. It is statistical. If the fraction of the submerged continental shelf that has been properly surveyed is vanishingly small, and what we have found in that fraction includes multiple confirmed ancient sites, multiple oral traditions proven accurate, and multiple carbon dates that predate the accepted origin of civilization, then the question is not whether there is more down there. It is why, after decades of knowing the water rose and took what was on the shoreline, we have not looked more carefully. Most people hear the words underwater ruins and picture Atlantis. They picture myth. They move on. You have spent this time with the carbon dates, the sonar images, the government confirmations, the ASI dive reports. You have seen what Ballard found and what the fishermen of Mahabalipuram knew before any scientist looked. The story is not that a lost super-civilization built everything and vanished. The story is simpler and stranger. Civilization is older than we were taught. It lived where we haven't looked, and the sea kept it for us. Hit subscribe. This is where we look. And I want your answer in the comments. Of these 10 sites, which one do you think, if fully and properly excavated, would do the most damage to the official timeline? Pick one. Build the case. Let's see who makes the strongest argument. The sonar scanner that started this was not looking for a city. It was measuring pollution levels in a gulf off the western coast of India, dragging its acoustic equipment across the floor in a routine pass, looking for nothing in particular. And 40 meters down, the readout returned a grid, 9 kilometers of walls, a drainage system, a bath, and a tooth from someone who lived there 9,500 years ago, before civilization was supposed to exist, before writing, before the first city, on a coast the sea had already been covering for 7,000 years by the time we thought to look. Somewhere right now, in water no survey has reached, something similar is waiting. The sea does not forget what it keeps. The water was here before us. It will be here after. Subscribe. The next site is still underwater.